So the Callisto Protocol's first story DLC finally released the other day. I know, it's a controversial game to say the very least, whether it's the almost comical situation surrounding their publisher releasing the wrong version at launch and subsequently setting fire to the game's reputation permanently via joining the trend of horrifically optimized video games, or people complaining about the combat being bad because, well, they had a skill issue. The Callisto Protocol is undoubtedly controversial. Its first proper DLC, however, is not, because it does not improve the game. In fact, I'd argue it downgrades the game. Nor does it even give us the final conclusion we expected and hoped for after they left us hanging with the worst cliffhanger ending in any form of media I've ever seen. Now, is that to say it's all bad? Kind of. Striking Distance Studios has decided yet again to sell a wildly unoptimized product, releasing the final transmission in the exact same state as the launch version of the main game.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
However, even outside of the abhorrent performance issues, this DLC just doesn't have a reason to exist in the first place, and I will have to heavily delve into spoiler territory throughout this review to fully explain why. The original ending to the Callisto Protocol would have been perfect in my opinion if they left it with Danny's monologue. That awful teaser which hinted at this DLC ruined the ending of the original game for me and did leave a particularly sour taste in my mouth, despite my genuine adornment for the overall storyline. I finished this game 3 times over to get it maxed out on achievements, even though it damn near ruined Jacob's character arc while simultaneously shutting down Danny as the main protagonist for a potential sequel all at the same time. A character who I frankly found remarkably more interesting than the main protagonist, and a character who I would love to see a prequel game set around. Although given the publisher's wildly false acclamations of TCP selling poorly, despite garnering over 1 million copies sold as a brand new IP in the horror genre, that ultimately doesn't seem very likely. And I do not, in any way, shape or form, expect this DLC to be the saving grace I assume Striking Distance is hoping it will be. After all, the game is still damn near fucking unplayable on PC and plagued with issues. The shader compilation screen they added post-launch no longer seems to work, and for me personally, it's not even showing up anymore. Bear in mind, they have not changed the fact that the game still needs to recompile shaders every time it opens, an issue that according to the Steam forums has been persisting since February of this year, meaning thanks to the fact the studio could not be asked to properly optimize their pipelining for the engine they chose to use, aka Unreal Engine 4, you will experience endless frame rate dips to, as you can see on screen, PowerPoint levels, thanks to shader compilation stutter of which they apparently could not be bothered to fucking fix nearly a year after launch. Ignoring the wild performance issues that somehow still exist nearly a year after launch, this is literally just them selling you the actual final mission on top of the $70 price tag for £12. Releasing the game in the way they initially did should have frankly been outright illegal, but to then do it again whilst reselling you an aspect of a game which should have never been DLC is unbelievable levels agreed. The DLC content itself isn't that good either. The coolest thing they added was the biophage infected robots, and they're just a reskinned enemy. They do nearly nothing differently. Sure, they look awesome, but they don't add anything awesome. They pretty much behave exactly like the Big Mouth. It's all fine and good for the death animations to be unique between these enemies, but you still need them to have some form of uniqueness outside of the visuals. I will admit the hammer is fire, but you can only use it in this fairly short DLC, and you only get the hammer around 1.5 hours in a DLC, which is merely around 2 hours long. Not to mention they learn absolutely fuck all from the criticism surrounding the main game being too linear. With how common of a criticism it was, you'd think they'd have listened to it, but unfortunately they didn't. The entire DLC is a string of linear fetch quests. That's it. I couldn't even enjoy the goddamn beautiful environment or even the cutscenes after the time, because the studio has decided to not work on optimizing the DLC despite that being the main cause of controversy at launch. I will however say that I did massively appreciate the more psychological based horror aspects of this DLC, which they bring forward from the main game, along with them finally addressing the voice you hear when walking through Black Iron right at the start of the game, which you never heard or experienced again until now. Again, further adding to the theory that this is nothing more than the actual final mission they had planned being resold as DLC. And do not get me started on the return of those motherfucking tunnels.
Oh no, no.
Those were a major problem with the main game caused by the deluded desire to bring the Callisto Protocol to last gen systems, and unfortunately instead of doing the right thing, aka not continuing support for those systems like Guerrilla Games decided to do for their Burning Shores DLC, they decided to once again try to brute force it on the PS4/Xbox One. Not only that, they doubled down on the vents by putting traps in them, and then went on to add a nonsensical lock system that I don't quite understand how they managed to fuck up. It's a lock system. How is that even possible to mess up? Quite frankly, this is one of the worst DLCs I've come across in gaming. It's something I'd expect to see 2017 EA attempt to pull off. And man, do I wish to say that this DLC did not kill any interest I had in this universe, but it really did. This DLC is complete fluff. It did not need to exist and never should have existed. I previously adored the world building of Callisto because it was undeniably phenomenal. The characters were interesting, the plot was fairly interesting, the overarching universe was incredibly interesting, and now the DLC has decided to end on an ending I have wildly mixed feelings about. Just like how Destiny 2's scam DLC Lightfall took place in a mere single cutscene, so did Callisto's Final Transmission DLC. You know that cliffhanger ending from the main game that I didn't like, which blatantly sets up Jacob's survival? Well, instead of sticking with that decision, they decided to make an entire DLC just to explain that after the biophage attacks Jacob, he gets ripped apart and kept alive by Dr. Mauler in order to transfer his memories to Danny, so that she can expose the cult, as Black Eye in prison did in fact crush Jacob and Mauler to death. Unfortunately, what this means is the entire DLC literally did not need to exist. It all took place in Jacob's head, and all these motherfuckers had to do was include this cutscene and Jacob getting beaten to near death at the end of the main game, so that it could have a perfect ending. Instead, we got given a literal completely pointless DLC and baited with the hopes of Jacob's survival for some quick cash. I will give credit where credit is due though. The final boss is admittedly absolutely fantastic, despite looking like nothing more than a reskin of the two-head boss fight which was reused 4 times in the main game. It is not that, it is a fun, engaging, and pretty impressive fight. If only the rest of the DLC was like that, and if only the main game opted to include more fights like this rather than the exact same boss 4 times. All things considered, I don't know how to feel about this DLC. On one hand, it does finally give us the conclusion we all wanted in the main game, that being Jacob sacrificing himself and getting the full character arc he deserved, but on the other hand, this should have been a part of the $70 game. It should not have been DLC. Not to mention it all feels utterly pointless considering how it could have been a mere single cutscene at the end of the original game. I had super high hopes for this as the concept art looked phenomenal, the biophage robot had me hyped, and it seemed like the developers listened to feedback. The unfortunate reality is that we merely ended up with a rushed, pointless, and disappointing DLC because the publisher likely wanted to move the studio on to a new game as fast as possible after it falsely declared the original to be a financial failure. All of this, along with the fact the other DLCs are only cosmetic MTX and game modes which should have been a part of the $70 price tag locked behind extra fees, I'm failing to see why anyone should buy this and why anyone should support this, let alone how I'd be able to call this anything but atrocious. So with all that being said, please do not forget to do all the things YouTubers love to beg you to do, aka check out the Twitter and Discord servers, as well as like, comment and subscribe, so that I will see you all in the next video, where I won't be even close to as disappointed as I am here, because Japan 2, unlike the Callisto Protocol Final Transmission, is phenomenal.